Hello, everyone, and welcome back once more. So, Wendy and I are going to have another chat. And this time, I mean, I have described it to Wendy as the causal event, but I also said to her, I'm not going to go into the history of it, and I will give you that history either in written form or maybe we'll talk about it at some point because it goes back a very, very long term. But yeah, the victim-victimizer mind virus.
I'm all ears. I love
Yeah,
that. I speak to you. I always hear a new phrase or a new term, and so start us off with what is a mind virus? Let's start there. What is a mind virus, and then we can go on to this specific one, the victim-victimizer.
it's a bit, well, again, if we use the kind of computer analogy, it's a bit like a virus sort of put into a computer that then just runs around and takes over the computer, really, and takes control of the computer. Well, a mind virus is the same, and this has come into this universe from outside it. It is the causal event of the fall of consciousness within this area of the universe. And as I say, at some point, I'll tell you that story. But it has been introduced into this universe and was the cause of the very, very first wars that took place at the highest level of our dimension, called the Lyran Wars. Some people will have heard of the Lyran Wars in the cradle of Lyra, which is the birthplace of all of the galactic races. It was introduced in to cause division, to cause dissent, to bring in polarity, because what the victim-victimizer does is split you into two groups. One is the victim and one is the victimizer. And we see it playing out around us at every single level in our society. It has absolutely taken us over.
Mhm.
And I think to the extent that we don't even see it most of the time. And so we need to begin to look at how things are playing out and to recognize where we see this and then to catch it. And if we're playing a part and we can't do something about somebody else or another country or whatever it might be, but we can, all of us, bring ourselves in service to the whole and do our bit. And if everybody does their bit, then it kind of disappears, doesn't it?
Okay, this is fascinating. So I guess what I think I'm hearing you say is that we either take the position of the victim
Mm,
or that we become the victimizer. So it's
yeah.
kind of like the bully and the bullied.
Yeah, it is very much so. And it isn't that we are necessarily always the victim. We may be the victim in relation to our societal structure or our workplace or it's kind of like within our society, Western society, which is still very patriarchal. I know we, you know, gone a long way in rights for women and things like this, but I mean, fundamentally, it's still a very patriarchal society, and certainly in various other societies around the world, it's unashamedly that. And women are second-class victims. Yeah, women are second-class citizens. They're victims of the patriarchy, and it plays out at that level, or it can play out even just within a family where you've got two kids and big brother's the bully and younger brother's the victim of the bully and things like that. I see it at the level of countries. There are some countries that play the victim card the whole time. Oh, this was done to us in our history. Oh, poor us. Oh, but actually they're playing a very clever game in that they play the victim card the whole time. But actually, if you look at it, they're the big bullies of the world. They're out there, shouting, you're anti-us, you killed so many of us. We've got this dreadful history where you've been appalling to us. And they're using that to bludgeon the rest of the world. So I mean that's a bit of a twist on the whole victim-victimiser thing. It's you know, the wolf in sheep's clothing sort of approach to it. But yeah, I mean, it plays up at every single level. It plays up within within countries, within societies, within relationships, within workplaces, within start to look and try to identify where you see this being played out. I mean, we've got, at the moment, we've got the elites who hold, you know, that one, they make up the 1%, but they have something, I don't know, some horrendous percentage, 70, 80% of the world's wealth in their hands or something like that. I mean, victimizers there because they're wielding the wealth they hold to keep the masses down. It's another level of it. So you'll see it playing out at all sorts of levels. Now, you know, you can't right all of these world problems all at once, but what you can do is see where you've been playing the victim in your own life. And I will guarantee every single one of us at some stage, at some level, in some relationship, whether it's work or personal or family or whatever it might be, we've all taken the victim role or been in a place where we can take the victim role. It becomes a choice. Do you, are you going to play that card or not? I saw this very clearly for the first time with myself when I was the victim of sexual abuse when I was a child at school. And it wasn't till I was in my early 30s that I really started to unpack it all. And I went deep into victim mode then because, you know, I was a victim of sexual abuse and it's all there in the terminology. So, you know, you're given the role immediately. And I went through lots of counselling and things like that. And all that did was take me round and round and round in the same circles. It never empowered me. You know, it helped me understand what had happened and why it had happened, but it never empowered me and got me out of that feedback loop. And so I broke away from that because it just started to become very uncomfortable. I didn't want to be sitting on the pity pot the whole time. It wasn't making my life fun or joyful or, you know, any of it wasn't uplifting in any way. And so I kind of began to step away from it, but it was still playing round and round in my head. And the next definitive moment in really pushing that away, that label away, and that understanding of myself in that way, totally away from me, came quite a bit later on when I was doing a public speaking course with someone in the States. And it was an amazing course. And you had to basically give a little spiel talking about really overcoming something huge in your life. And I was talking about, you know, I did this talk about what had happened to me and how I'd come into an awareness of, because as a child, you don't put that label on yourself. You're not a victim of sexual abuse at 9 years old. You don't understand that at all. That label I put on myself in my early 30s when I came to really understand it and explore it. And then it was kind of like it stuck to me like sticky paper, you know, it was like fly paper. How did I get rid of it? And I was being given a lift back to the airport by one of the people on the course after the course. And he said to me, he said, you know, your story is the most amazing story. You need to get out there and you need to tell everybody about it because it's how you overcame that. It's a story of empowerment and things. And I thought, but it's just me. My response to him was immediate. It was an immediate no. And I thought, why is that? And it was because it kept me in that victim role. And by that point, I didn't see myself as a victim any longer. I saw myself as someone who had stepped beyond that and moved beyond that. And I call it life alchemy. I'd taken the crap, you know, this pile of poo that I've been given as an experience. And I had managed to turn it around over the years I've been working with it into something that made me stronger and made me more whole. So it was part of the process of me coming back to myself, finding myself, and getting back into alignment with myself. So it was one of the many boulders that, got flung, we get flung in our way for us to overcome, to make us stronger. So by choosing not to stick with the victim role, it served me, and I could alchemize that lead into gold. And that's how we use the victimizer mind virus. It chatters around in your head. Poor little me, oh, he's not being fair to me. Oh, it's not, life's not fair. Oh, I've sort of lost the game before I've begun because X, Y, Z, the color of my skin, the this, that, my sex. I mean, I used to say when I was younger, I've lost the game of life before I began because I was born female. You're immediately on the back foot. These are all things we're taught, but they also have some truth in them. But we can choose to worship at the altar of that truth, or we can choose to change, reframe the whole thing into a much higher iteration where we take that harsh reality and make it into something that helps to uplift us, or helps to strengthen us, or helps to better a situation in some way. So, we are not victims of the victim-victimizer mind virus that sits out there. It is endemic in our society. It has been introduced and part of our society since the beginning. It's part of galactic history. It plays out again and again and again because we live in a polarity universe, and the victim-victimizer takes you to extreme polarities. But it becomes our choice whether we choose to play the game, and it is a game. I can't remember. I mean, if I've been very, very switched on, Wendy, before we started this conversation, I'd have gone and looked it up. But there was an experiment done somewhere in America quite some years ago, where this guy took two groups of college kids, I think, and he split one into the prison guards and one group into the prisoners. And they were all friends and they knew each other and stuff like this. But he let them play out the roles, and the prison guards became monsters. And then when it flipped, when they swapped roles, rather than saying, oh, those prison guards were really horrible and it was a nasty experience and I wouldn't give anybody else that experience, so I'm going to do it differently, the new prison guards behaved just as badly.
Isn't that?
And it was fascinating how decent people suddenly put in these roles change their personalities. That's a victim-victimizer.
And that's how strong it runs within us. I mean, listening to you, I've kind of been writing down almost like a process, which is you have the experience, whatever it is, the harsh reality, I think you called it, the bad event, the perpetration, if you like, of something. And that leads you to victim consciousness and this poor me and a justification of why you are the victim. And hopefully, and I don't suppose everyone gets there in their lifetime, because we can, of course, remain the victim for our whole lives, can't we?
Yeah. And it can give us a role and an identity and an excuse for, well, I'm not successful because this was done to me.
That's really key. And hopefully we make it out of that. Some of us do, and we move to the hero's story, don't we? Survival and, coming up from the ashes. And of course that is uplifting, and it's certainly better than being in the victim mode. But I love that you said that even though that felt more positive and people were almost admiring of you, like you said, it's a continual It's a continuation of the worship of the victim stance.
Yeah, yeah,
So the key from what you're saying here is the transcendence beyond the mentality and the mind virus that is that there has to be a victim or indeed a victimizer. Because for me, Sarah, this sounds like, the peace that comes from that alchemizing the lead into gold, that's an inside job.
yeah.
And when we can do that work for ourselves and integrate it in the ways that you've explained, maybe we don't become those prison wardens that had done to us.
Yeah.
We are
I mean,
then.
it's so common. You hear, people's excuse for being an abuser is that they were abused as a child. That's someone who hasn't alchemized it. They've just grown into a position where they've got some power, and so they're using it against those weaker than them. And the wound is still, it's wanging backwards and forwards the whole time. It's a deep, deep wounding, and we have to heal the wound and come into a neutral place on it, not just take on a different role within the game.
I love that neutrality. And I've heard it said before that, world peace starts with our inner peace, the work that we do on ourselves, our own victim mentality, our own wounding and healing. Really, if we show up every day and only did that,
Yeah.
that's contributing to world
Yeah,
peace.
and if we all decide we want world peace, well, where does it start? It starts with no wars. Well, what do you have to do in order to have that? Well, no soldiers. If the soldiers don't show up, big boss man can be saying, I want to kill, I don't know, Russians or whoever it is you've chosen to be your bad guy this week.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you, Wendy, but I don't want to kill any Russians.
Well, I'm
So
seeing.
the only way you're going to make me do that is if either you've brainwashed me,
Mhm.
or you've coerced me in such a way that I feel I've got no choice but to do it. But there is always a choice. All you have to do, all anybody has to do to stop war is to say, no, I'm not going to pick up a gun. I'm not going to go and kill people who I don't know and who have never done me any wrong on the say-so of someone who has a political agenda going.
Yeah.
I mean, but we are brainwashed. Again, it's this brainwashing into thinking that, and they do it very cleverly. Oh, they're going to invade us. Oh, they've said this, they've said, most of which they haven't said if you go and actually really research it. But, lies are told to us, stories are told to us, fed to us through the press to get us all frightened and uptight and indignant, and how dare you do this to our country and all of this. So you'll be running to the sign-up office to become a soldier, to pick up your gun, to go and shoot somebody on some made-up pretext. We've all got to be cleverer than that. We've got to be so much cleverer than that. Again, we're becoming the victims of somebody else's agenda there by not being sovereign within ourselves about it. And we just have to say no, and the whole crap ends.
I love this. I mean, I didn't think that the conversation with the victim-victimizer mind virus was going to take us so deeply into the truth of this. As you've been talking about this taking a stand, that it is a choice. I wrote two things: not on my watch, not in my name. And, I see more and more people now switching on and realizing that you're quite right, Sarah. Nobody wants war. Nobody, the only people that want war is the people that are probably over there trying to distract us from whatever else the heck it is they're hiding. War is an industry. And, this whole.
Make money for the few.
Yeah, and this whole thing is a mind virus. So thank you so much for your insights on this really important and deeply liberating concept. Thank you.
My pleasure, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it, and we'll see you again. Bye.